Okay, you are absolutely not going to believe this one. Back in 1932, Australia declared war.
Right.
But forget, international conflicts or invasions. This was a war against, well, emus.
Whitelist birds, yeah.
And the crazy part, it's often said they didn't exactly win. It's just one of those totally bizarre historical moments. Makes you scratch your head.
It certainly does, and that's what we're diving into today. This really unique event, the so-called Emu War of 1932 over in Western Australia.
So, a national response to birds because they were messing with crops.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
A huge number of emus were causing absolute chaos for farmers and their wheat crops.
Right. And for this deep dive, we've really looked around. We've got newspaper reports from the time, like the Daily News in Perth,
Yep, contemporary accounts, plus historical stuff, Wikipedia, of course, but also analysis from places like Australian Geographic, Insider Guides.
even Freight Waves and Meat Eater, which is an interesting mix.
Definitely. And get this, there's even a fictionalized book trying to give the emu perspective, Letters from the Emu War.
Seriously. Wow. Okay.
And a Reddit thread we found that offers a maybe slightly different take on the whole defeat narrative.
Okay. So lots to draw on. Our goal here then is to really get into this strange story.
Exactly. We want to move past just the sheer weirdness of it and figure out what actually happened, why it happened, and maybe why we're still talking about it almost a century later.
All right, let's do it. So, what was the core problem? What kicked this whole thing off?
Well, the roots go back to just after World War I. The government was settling returned soldiers on farmland in Western Australia,
Okay.
but often this was in pretty marginal areas like the Campion district,
Yeah.
not exactly prime farming land.
Uh-huh. Tough gone already then.
And then the Great Depression hit, so wheat prices just, well, they tanked,
Oh, man.
which, massively increased the frustration for these farmers who were already struggling. So you've got this mix of policy, economics, setting the stage.
So these guys are trying to make a living in really tough conditions,
Yeah.
and then the emus show up.
Exactly. You see, there's this annual emu migration. After breeding season, maybe 20,000 of them head towards the coast.
20,000.
Huge numbers. And the cleared farmland, with its dams and water supplies, well, looked pretty good to them,
Like an oasis.
pretty much. So they weren't just nibbling, they were, like, devastating the wheat crops. Plus, they were knocking down fences.
Oh, right. Which causes other problems.
Yeah, it let rabbits get in, causing even more damage. A real double whammy for the farmers.
You can see why they'd be desperate. So these
Well,
farmers, lots of war vets among them.
Yeah.
What did they do?
Well, they knew about machine guns from the war, their effectiveness, or supposed effectiveness.
Right.
So they went straight to the top, appealed to the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pierce, for military help. They wanted serious firepower.
And Pierce disagreed. Seems like a big leap, sending the army after birds.
He did, yeah, but with conditions. The military would operate the guns, but the WA government had to pay for transport, and the farmers had to sort out food, accommodation, and pay for the ammo.
Ah, okay. So not entirely a freebie. Why do you think he agreed?
Probably a few reasons. Maybe some target practice for the troops in peacetime.
Could be.
And, farmers were getting pretty unhappy out west. Maybe a bit of politics showing the federal government was listening.
Makes sense. Appeasing the voters.
And interestingly, they even brought along a Fox movie-tone cinematographer to film it all.
Really? A newsreel. Maybe a PR angle, too, then.
Could well be. So the military gets involved. Who was actually in charge of this operation?
This bird detachment.
It was led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, Royal Australian Artillery. He had 2 Lewis guns
Lewis Gars.
and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, plus Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran. So 3 men, 2 guns.
10,000 rounds against
Yeah.
birds. Okay, so what happened when they first, engaged the enemy?
Well, first off, rain delayed things, scattered the emus.
Of course it did.
But then, November 2nd, near Campion, they spotted about 50 emus. But they were out of range.
Ah, so close.
Some locals tried to herd the emus towards the guns, but that just completely failed. The emus did what emus do, split into small groups, ran fast. Impossible targets, really.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like trying to shoot smoke.
Exactly. The first burst of fire, pretty useless. A second go later that day maybe got a number of birds. Perhaps a dozen.
A dozen out of 50 with machine guns. Not exactly a stunning success rate.
Not what they'd hoped for, no. It really shows, applying old solutions to new problems doesn't always work.
Did things get any better?
Not really. November 4th, they tried an ambush near a dam. Over 1,000 emus approaching.
1,000. Okay, this is it.
They waited till they were close, Opened fire, killed about 12,
Yeah.
and then one of the guns jammed.
No, you're kidding.
Nope, gun jammed. The rest scattered. That was it for the day.
A jammed gun at the perfect moment. That's almost comical.
It has its moments, yeah.
Yeah.
So Meredith had moved south looking for tamer emus. Apparently, still not much luck.
Tamer.
That's what the report said. And get this, Army observers noted the emus seemed organized, like leaders watching out, warning the others.
Seriously, look out, emus. They were adapting.
It certainly sounds like it. Suggests they figured out the threat pretty quickly.
Wow. Okay. Any other bright ideas?
They tried mounting a gun on a truck.
A mobile attack unit. How'd that go?
Failed. Trucks couldn't keep up with the emus off-road, and the ride was so bumpy the gunner couldn't aim at all.
So the high-speed emu pursuit vehicle wasn't. Okay. So after all this, end of the first attempt, what's the scorecard?
By November 8th, so about 6 days in, they'd fired 2,500 rounds.
2,500 rounds. And the kills?
Estimates vary wildly. The official military count was around 50.
50.
But the settlers, the farmers, claimed more like 200 to 500.
Wow.
Quite a gap.
Huge gap.
Major Meredith, in his report, famously noted his unit suffered no casualties, only a loss of dignity.
A loss of dignity, I bet. How did the experts see it? Like the bird people?
Well, ornithologist Dominic Cervanti had that great quote about the emu command ordering guerrilla tactics.
Guerrilla emus.
Yeah, breaking into small units, rendering the machine guns ineffective. He said the crestfallen field force therefore withdrew, although it was actually only about a week, not the month you mentioned.
Right. Crestfallen field force. Love it. So the army pulls out. How did that go down back in the cities? With the politicians?
Predictably, not well. Lots of negative press. Army loses to birds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, easy headline.
It even got debated in the House of Representatives on November 8th.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall for that session.
Absolutely. Faced with the bad press and, frankly, the embarrassment, Pierce ordered the withdrawal. Same day, November 8th. Pulled the men and the guns out.
Quick turnaround. And Meredith, what was his explanation?
He tried to save face. Compared the emus to Zulus, bizarrely. Said they had the invulnerability of tanks.
Emus like tanks. That's quite a statement.
It really is. Meanwhile, in Parliament, MP Rowley James mockingly asked if the soldiers would get medals.
Ouch.
And another MP, A.E. Green, later joked maybe the emus deserved the medals.
Okay, fair enough.
Poor Sir George Pierce got stuck with the nickname Minister of the Emu War.
That's gotta hurt. But the actual problem hadn't gone away, right? The emus were still there.
Still there, still eating crops. And things got worse. Hot weather, drought. It drove even more emus to the farms looking for water and food. Thousands of them.
So the farmers started asking for help again.
They did, pleaded for assistance. And the Premier of Western Australia backed them up strongly.
What about the army? Weren't they a bit reluctant after the first time?
While adding to the pressure, there was a report from the local base commander claiming the first operation actually killed 300 emus, much higher than the initial figures.
A revised kill count. Convenient.
Possibly. Anyway, by November 12th, the Minister of Defense, Pierce again, approved round 2.
He did, after all the mockery.
Defended it in the Senate. Said the emus were a serious agricultural threat, they had to act. There was talk of just lending the guns to the state, but apparently there weren't enough experienced machine gunners.
So Meredith gets the call again.
Yep, back in charge. Lack of other options, supposedly.
Round 2. Okay, did it go any better this time?
A bit. Started November 13th. First couple of days, maybe 40 kills reported. Third day, less successful again.
Still seems like hard work.
Definitely. But by early December, they were reporting about 100 kills per week. More consistent, maybe.
Okay, a steady rate of attrition, I guess.
Meredith was finally recalled on December 10th. His final report claimed 986 confirmed kills.
Almost 1,000. That
Yeah.
sounds much more significant.
It does. And he used 9,860 rounds to do it, which is exactly 10 rounds per kill. Much better ratio than the first attempt.
10 rounds per kill. Still seems like a lot for a large flightless bird, but better than 50 rounds per kill, I suppose.
He also estimated another 2,500 wounded birds probably died later.
So was this seen as a success? Finally.
Well, opinion was still divided. A newspaper article a few years later in the Coolgardie Miner argued that, yeah, despite the criticism, it had worked to save the remaining crops.
Bogue.
But the government still refused later requests for military help. And 34, 43, 48 all turned down.
It's maybe not that successful in their eyes.
To suggest they weren't keen to repeat the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And this contrast is interesting, the big military show versus what actually ended up working long term.
Right. So if the army wasn't the final answer, what was? You mentioned something else worked better.
Yeah, the bounty system. It had actually been around since 1923, but they kept it going, and that proved way more effective.
Bounties, just paying people to hunt them.
Basically, yes. In the first 6 months of 1934 alone, over 57,000 bounties were claimed.
57,000, wow.
And get this, between 1945 and 1960, estimates suggest 284,700 emus were killed in WA under the bounty system.
Good grief. Those are staggering numbers. So a much simpler, more direct approach worked far better than the military one.
Seems that way. Traditional wildlife management, basically.
What did the rest of the world think about all this? Did the news spread?
Oh yeah, it reached the UK. And some conservation groups over there protested. They were worried about the extermination of the rare emu.
Rare. I thought there were tens of thousands.
Well, rare might have been an exaggeration, but the sentiment was about conservation. Even Australian ornithologists like Cervanty and Whitell called the military campaign an attempt at mass destruction.
It does raise ethical questions, doesn't it, when pest control becomes something else?
Absolutely. It shows how quickly that line can blur in these human-wildlife conflicts.
So apart from bounties, what else did they end up doing?
Fencing. Exclusion barrier fencing became really popular. Basically, building better fences designed specifically to keep emus and other animals like dingoes out of farmland.
Makes sense. Keep them out in the first place.
A physical barrier.
Yeah.
And they did release more ammo to farmers later, in the 1950s, for ongoing control efforts.
So, ultimately, while the emus might have, let's say, won the battle against Meredith's dignity,
Yeah.
they kind of lost the war for the wheat fields.
You could say that. The population was certainly reduced and managed through those other methods.
What's the legacy then? This story clearly stuck around.
Oh, absolutely. It's captured the public imagination. Like you said, bizarre. There was a musical adaptation workshopped a few years back.
A musical about the Emu War.
Yep. And an action comedy movie called, wait for it, The Emu War came out just last year.
Perfect title.
And apparently there's another comedy film about it being developed, with John Cleese involved.
John Cleese. Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. It's definitely got that absurdist streak.
It really does. And the irony, of course, is that the emu is right there on Australia's coat of arms.
Yeah. Alongside the kangaroo, talk about a complicated relationship with your national symbols.
It's quite something. Now, we should mention that Reddit discussion we saw. It offered a bit of a counter-narrative.
Oh, yeah. What was their take? Did the emus not actually win?
Well, their argument is that the whole war idea is overblown. They point out the first attempt was tiny three guys, a truck,
True.
and that the soldiers did fulfill part of their orders, like collecting emu skins, which wasn't really mentioned much.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't just about killing them.
Apparently not entirely. And they argue the second campaign was much more successful, nearly 1,000 kills, much better kill ratio, better than some conventional warfare, they claimed.
Interesting point.
And they also say the success of the bounty system later doesn't mean the military part was a total failure. Maybe it was just, one part of a bigger effort that took time. Less of a humiliating loss, more of a clumsy first step.
A different framing, definitely. A good reminder that history isn't always simple, black and white.
Exactly. So, wrapping up this deep dive.
Huh.
Big emu problem for farmers. 2 military attempts with, let's say, mixed and much mocked results.
Right. Lots of mockery.
And ultimately a bounty system and fencing proving more effective long-term solutions.
So what's the big takeaway here for you from this whole feathery fiasco?
For me, the Emu War, yeah, it's funny, but it's also a fascinating look at unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And the real challenges when humans and wildlife clash. It kind of shows how reaching for a military solution for what's basically an ecological problem, well, it can go spectacularly wrong.
Or at least be spectacularly inefficient.
Right. And it also shows how surprisingly resilient wildlife can be. Makes you question our habit of always going for the big, dramatic fix when maybe simpler, targeted things work better.
Definitely changes how you think about winning and losing in that context. Okay, so final thought to leave people with.
No.
Why does this story stick with us? Is it just because it's so absurd? Birds versus machine guns?
Maybe. It's got that ultimate underdog vibe, right? Even if the underdog is a 6-foot bird.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just something deeper about, our attempts to control nature and how messy that often gets.
It certainly makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other historical events that seem straightforward on the surface might have these kinds of weird, complicated layers hidden underneath? What other lost battles weren't quite what they seemed?
That's a great question to ponder.